Okay, well, thank you guys for having me. I'm going to share my screen and get started. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So today we are going to talk a little bit about disabilities, ableism, and learn hopefully a lot. So let me share my screen and present. Can you guys see the presentation?
On Canva.
Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Yep, it is Canva. We love Canva at Raise the Bar. Okay, so we're going to talk mostly about ableism today. Has anyone ever heard that term, ableism? No, I can't hear responses, so that's okay. But okay, well, we're going to learn about that and more today. So today's agenda, I will give you some more background on Raise the Bar and what our organization does. Then we're going to go into disabilities and an introduction on disabilities. Then we'll talk about ableism, what it is, and then we'll get into some tips on how to be inclusive. Before I dive into all of this, does anyone have any other goals or things that they want to learn about from today's presentation? Awesome. Well, I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to raise your hand or call out to me if you have questions or comments. And there will be some times that I pause for discussion. So I definitely encourage people to share. So Raise the Bar is a nonprofit organization. We, like Alex said, we are based in Camden. We support families that have children with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. And oh, you know what? I don't think I shared with audio. That's what I meant to remember to do. So let me reshare real quick so that you guys can hear our amazing video. Okay, there it is. Share screen. Sorry, one sec. Share sound. Got it. Okay. Okay, great. So you should be able to hear this. Raise the Bar is a nonprofit organization that helps families of children with disabilities living in Camden, New Jersey.
We play, we have fun, and this is happy.
We help them through family support programs, youth programs, and navigating resources.
We have fun, we talk.
The whole goal of Raise the Bar is just to be a trusted resource and a strong community for families in Camden that have a child with disabilities.
We have fun together.
I like it dance.
Awesome. Were you guys able to see and hear that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that's Raise the Bar. We have 3 different program areas: resource navigation, family support, and youth programs. And so through all of those areas, our overall mission is just to be a trusted resource for families in Camden that have a child with intellectual or developmental disabilities. So if you're interested in learning more or getting more involved, let me know. But I will move on to kind of the core of our presentation, which is talking more generally about disabilities and how we can all be more inclusive in our daily lives. So these are some of the types of disabilities that are out there. There's physical, developmental, intellectual, behavior and emotional, which is more like mental health, learning disabilities like dyslexia, sensory disabilities like blindness and deafness. So there's a lot of different categories of disabilities. Raise the Bar specifically focuses on developmental and intellectual disabilities. So developmental just means that it happens as part of the development process. So before age before adolescence, basically. So some examples of that are autism, Down syndrome, Fragile X, cerebral palsy, but this is by no means a comprehensive list. And then intellectual disability is really specifically about the cognitive functioning of someone and what their IQ is. So a lot of times people might have both an intellectual and a developmental disability, but they also might just have one or the other. So a lot of people, some people who have autism do not have an intellectual disability, but some people do. So it really just depends. But those are the two categories that Raise the Bar focuses on specifically. And so when we talk about disabilities, there's many different lenses that you can think about it, but kind of like zooming out intellectually, what does it mean to have a disability? The traditional model and the model that we definitely see most often in our world is called the medical model. And that's the idea that a disability is something wrong or a deficit in the person, and that this person needs to be fixed or needs intervention to be better, or more quote unquote normal. So in this perception of that, if there's a successful intervention, then the person is closer to what we presume to be normal. But then in the social model, which is kind of the different flip side of that coin, is that disabilities are not reflective of a, inherent problem within a person, that really the only reason disabilities causes problems is because our world is not accessible and open to everyone equally. And in this perspective, people's differences don't need to be fixed, but really should be celebrated. And they're not necessarily deficits at all, but really benefits, because everyone adds something unique to the world. So in this case, successful intervention is really helping people, helping the world improve and become more open to all types of individuals. So you might imagine, based on how I was talking about it, but Raise the Bar, we strongly believe in the social model of disabilities. We celebrate everyone and who they are and their differences. And we try to help families face the systematic barriers that are in their place and work together to, make a world that is more accessible for everyone. So before I move on, does anyone have any comments or questions on this? Okay. I will say that it's definitely important to know that the medical model is still, the most popular and the most forefront. So like, even though we try to focus on the social model, there's a lot of ways that our world is still, operating with the traditional model of disabilities. And so we help families with that. And we ourselves still, have some perspectives in that area as well. But has anyone heard the term neurodiversity? Awesome. Does anyone want to explain it for everyone else? Yeah, go ahead. Whoever.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like how someone thinks differently than someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So basically it's just the idea that like there's so many types of diversity, and some of them we talk about all the time and some of them we don't. And neurodiversity is one of those types. So people's brains work differently, people think differently. And so it's a different term that can be used to describe people with autism or even with ADHD. Basically, people can identify as neurodivergent. And it's just something that kind of focuses on that social model that I was talking about, where difference does not equal worse. Different is just different. And there's really great things that come from that. So yeah, awesome. Thank you for answering that. Okay, so we talked very basic and high level about disabilities, and now we're going to talk about ableism and how to be an anti-ableist. So I think I asked at the beginning, but I didn't see any hands. Has anyone heard of the term ableism? Yeah. Awesome. Does any? Yeah, go ahead.
Ableism is when like people are not really very kind towards like neurodivergent people and trying and also to be like it's how things aren't really accessible. It's a little hard to explain it properly, but that's like,
Yeah. No, that was incredible. That was a great explanation. Exactly. So we'll talk more about that, but that's a great starting point. So yeah, prejudice and discrimination against people with disabilities is a good summary. So I am going to share a video. Did that work when I switched my tab? Can you see a YouTube video? Anyone? Let me see. So is the video showing for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So this is a good video that will show you a little bit more about ableism.
What is ableism? Ableism is when an individual is excluded or treated differently because of a disability. We are all different, and all of us move and think in different ways. Think about how some of your friends can throw a basketball further, and others can solve a math problem faster. Differences are what make us unique, and what make the world around us more interesting and diverse. Imagine how boring it would be if we were all exactly the same. By supporting and celebrating our differences, we can help break down ableism and include all our friends when we play. For example, if Isabella uses a wheelchair and Mark, Ty, and Angela won't let her play with them because they don't want to wait for her to catch up, that is ableist. There are times that adults in our lives can be ableist too. If Isabella wants to dance in dance class, the teacher can create special adaptations to help her move alongside the rest of the group. If the teacher does not do this, that is ableist. But this teacher is a good ally and did the right thing by creating adaptations. We might notice that sometimes our world is not built to help people move around independently. Ezra is blind, so he can't see like his family can. When Ezra goes on walks with his family, sometimes the crosswalk can be dangerous for him. There are signs around for people who can see, indicating when it is safe to cross. But Ezra can't see the signs. Ezra needs an audio cue telling him when it is safe to cross, but that's not always there. This is ableist. You can be a good friend or ally by noticing ableism around you and speaking up. If you notice Isabella having a hard time because people are being mean to her about her wheelchair, you can tell them that is not nice and invite Isabella to play with you. If you notice a friend in class who needs special adaptations, you can tell a parent, teacher, or coach to help you find a solution. Being a good friend is important, and so is speaking out when you see ableism around you. Move United's inclusive playbook uses the power of sport to push what is possible for people with disabilities, fueling conversation and inciting action that leads us to a world where everyone is included. Educators and sport leaders can download free copies and resources.
Okay, awesome. Any reactions to that? Any thoughts?
That was an interesting demonstration.
What was that?
That was an interesting demonstration of what ableism is.
Good. I'm glad you thought so. I think it's always better to see it in action, or like a video is easier to explain it. So I'm glad you liked it. Any other thoughts or reactions?
I think it's very true about how the world necessarily wasn't always built around being able to support others, and that people still do need to work on it to be more inclusive.
Yeah, exactly. And during this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more about ableism, and then we're going to get into some ways that you can be part of that and make the world more inclusive. Awesome. Okay, so I honestly think that you guys get it. You get what ableism is, but just so that we cover all of our notes, ableism is prejudice against disabilities. And it's the assumption that being someone who doesn't have a disability is better than being someone who does have a disability. And, at the basic form, it's a form of oppression. It's a way of devaluing other people and saying that they're less than because of their disability. And so there's different ways that this shows up. There is hostile ableism, and that's usually more unlikely. Like, people kind of hide it more. People aren't always going just straight up and saying that they are ableist. More often you'll see benevolent ableism. And those are things that are really sometimes embedded in our society and in the language that we see all the time, which is patronizing and kind of like assuming that people with disabilities need help, and just reinforcing that unequal power dynamic. So there is both in the world, but sometimes the benevolent ableism is harder to spot. So we'll go through some examples, but before we do that, can anyone tell me of examples of ableism that you've seen in your lives or in your school? Yeah, go ahead.
So I happen to have Asperger's syndrome, and I had an IEP throughout elementary school, and I had a 504 starting in middle school, and I continue to have it now.
Okay.
Was going into second grade, my case manager tried to take away my IEP and put me in a non-inclusion classroom just to try it out because she didn't believe I was autistic when clearly I was. And that my parents and teacher fought really hard for me to get all those accommodations back. And I was in inclusion classrooms for the rest of my elementary school career.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it just shows also like the importance of advocacy and, caregivers and self-advocates like speaking up about what they need. So that's a great example of being, just assuming what someone else needs and not necessarily letting their own experience dictate what they accommodate in school. And that happens all the time. Yeah.
I know it's like, especially with schools, I'm autistic, and I know like bullying can be a very big issue. I know I experienced it.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry you experienced it. It definitely is still prevalent. Yeah. Did you want to add something?
Going off of what you were saying, even now I'm in these school groups where there are other autistic people in the groups that I'm in, and I see when that person says things that isn't necessarily typical or expected, I see people like making jokes behind his back or side-eyeing him, and it makes me feel really bad because that's just who he is, and he should that or have to deal with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Can I share something?
Yeah.
I technically don't have anything diagnosed, but I remember in second, but my teachers thought I had ADHD, so they gave me an IEP, but at my old school, my teachers didn't really know how to deal with it, so often times I would even the teachers at this school, they originally thought I didn't have an IEP or I didn't have accommodations because they just because I got good grades, and they thought
Yeah, that's actually, I was just listening to a podcast on this actually on my way into work today of just like people expecting certain disabilities to look a certain way, even to what you said about Asperger's as well. Like people think they know what ADHD looks like or Asperger's or autism, and they don't let it be the person's experience and let you dictate like what you need. So thank you all so much for sharing that, and especially for telling me about your experiences. And I would love, as we go on this presentation, like it's really important for me to say that I am not someone with a disability. I don't even think I gave you my personal background, so I will in a second, but I want to make sure that you all, especially if you identify as having a disability, like please feel free to share as much or as little as you would like. And because honestly, lived experience is like the most important part of all of this. So thank you so much for sharing that. I don't think I said in the beginning, but the reason that I am so passionate about all of this and that I started Raise the Bar is because my younger sister has disabilities. She's nonverbal and significantly developmentally delayed. So she needs a lot of support and will need like constant care for the rest of her life. So I grew up in this world of people with disabilities, and it's always been really special to me. And so, yeah, that's a little bit more about me. But I really appreciate you all sharing. Did anyone else want to say anything or share any examples of how they've seen ableism in their lives or school? Yeah, did you have one to add?
Yeah, and I know with schools, it's like if you're succeeding and doing so great, they're like, okay, you're too good to have it now. Or
They're take away accommodations
Yep.
if they see that you're successful, because then they think, oh wait, you don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
But we're like,
Exactly.
If what's making us successful.
Yeah.
If you take that away, then we're not
Basically, it's all
successful.
bad judgment.
Yep.
Yes,
There you go, Sean.
exactly.
if for say.
That's such a good point.
Took a while for me to get like my IEP because like, no, you don't need it. You're doing all right.
Too many.
But
Right.
I needed the more support. to succeed.
Yeah.
There are too many wrong assumptions, but what can we say? We all underestimate each other sometimes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's sometimes really hard to like prove that you need something, unfortunately, in this world where schools, everything costs money. And so schools don't always want to give you those things. But yeah, thank you for sharing and thank you for advocating for yourself so that you could get, what made you the most successful. Awesome. I'm going to keep going, but please continue to share as we go through this. So we're going to talk about ways to be more inclusive for everyone.
To be an athlete anyway. Don't you need-
What was that?
He was reading the slide title out loud.
Oh, okay. Thank you. It's hard. It's a little hard. I've never done this like virtual where I'm virtual and you're not. So it's a little hard. But yes, thank you for reading the slide. So basically I would like to share this slide, and then if anyone has anything to say about how they like to identify, I would love to hear it. But basically, in a world of language, as you all know, it's constantly changing. So one of the things that is talked about a lot in the disability community is identity first person first language. And so identity first being a disabled person and person first being a person with disabilities. So in general, I would err on the side of person first. That's generally the most respectful, but it definitely depends on the person and the community. So actually the deaf community and the autistic community more often prefer identity first because they feel like it's not something that they're ashamed of. Like this is who they are, and they are proud in a lot of ways of being deaf or being autistic. Whereas person first is putting the person first. So like I said, there's not a right or wrong answer here. It's most important to ask someone what they prefer. Does anyone have any experiences or thoughts on this? Yeah.
I personally don't have a preference of identity first or person first. It's usually I find it's actually more of a challenge figuring out who to say I have Asperger's versus like I am autistic or I have autism, because Asperger's isn't in the DSM-5 and
Yeah.
people wouldn't know that. So when I was first telling my peers that I was on the spectrum, which that's another thing I like to say, I'm on the spectrum.
Yeah.
I have Asperger's, and they're like, well, what is that? So then I have to explain like technically smile is form of autism, and then they'll say, well, what is that? And that's kind of helped me understand who do I use the language for? Like,
Right.
I am autistic versus I have autism. It's just whatever comes out. For me, it's really just knowing who can I say Asperger's with and who can I say autism.
So basically the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an aspect of
the way you're speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also important for say with how people you gotta also be careful that you can be able to identify it as that you are, choose to even do that based on the people around you.
Yeah. Like feeling comfortable doing that, you mean?
Right now, for me, I'm kind of an open book when it comes to that, because I want people to know so that they can know I'm going to have sensory challenges. I'm going to be a little bit awkward in social situations. If I misinterpret their joke, it's because I'm taking it literally because I'm on the spectrum.
Yeah.
But no, especially like knowing when I was younger, like who could I really be safe to tell that with? Because I wasn't initially comfortable with really talking about it until like grade. And then at that point, it was just like loud and proud. If you don't like me, that's your problem. So I'm talking about it now. Thank you.
Yeah.
But again, it's also if you're thinking about it from like an Asperger's perspective, there isn't a term for like I am autistic. You can't really say that with Asperger's. It's really only I have Asperger's. So
Yeah.
it's hard, and yeah, it's very
Yeah.
fascinating how like the language really changes.
The language restrictions you're talking about.
Yeah. I don't know if I call them restrictions, but options, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds more like
And that's such a good point about Asperger's. Like we could go on a whole, aside about that, but I never thought about it, how there's not really a way of saying like I am with Asperger's. So yeah, that's just really interesting. There's so many different ways to use language. And to some people, it's like, why does this matter? Like language doesn't matter. But I think we all know that language is so important because it's how we describe ourselves and how we identify. And so I think the main point here that everyone is making is that leading with respect is the most important. So asking people if they do have a preference, and then if they don't have a preference, that's fine. Just use what you think is the most respectful. So yeah, thank you again for sharing that. And we're going to talk even more about how, I'm not even going to say some of these words on here because I don't like to, but there's a lot of outdated language out there, and some of it is more obvious than others. So I just think it's important to be open, kind of like with everything in our world that's evolving, just being open to learn. And if someone with disabilities specifically tells you like, please don't say that, that's not appropriate, or this is why I don't like when you say that, just always being open-minded and hearing that, because like I said, language is so important and it really dictates how we see the world. So I'm not going to go into detail on these, but there are things that we should not be saying. And the first one is something that people probably don't necessarily always know. It's not as obvious as the last one, but there's just better ways to say things these days. And so accessible is definitely preferred. And same with these. I'm definitely not going to go through all of them, but they're interesting. They're things that you will hear all the time. And so that's why I like this slide even more than the last, because there are things that you like, honestly, in our society, special needs is very, very popular. And it's something that I grew up saying and hearing a lot. And a lot of people in the disability community do not like that language. And so it's something that I have tried to stop saying, because they feel like it's patronizing. Like everyone has needs. And so saying special needs is just like, doesn't really help anyone. And it just is patronizing. So the other one of like confined to a wheelchair or suffering from autism, that is like a pet peeve of mine. I hate when people say things like that because they don't even realize it. It is so embedded in our world and that medical model that I was talking about. And so I'm not here to like police anyone, and neither should you, in my opinion. It's not about like avoiding these specific things. It's really just about, like I said, being open-minded, being respectful of people's preferences, and also being willing to admit when you've said something that you shouldn't have said, or when you learn how to be better. We all are going to make mistakes in this area because we are in an ableist world, unfortunately. So it's just trying to like recognize that around you and improve slowly but surely.
Destroy ableism.
Oh.
To find something that what you all can play.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Okay.
You want to like get a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, further back in the room is harder to hear.
Move a little closer.
If you destroy ableism, you're gonna have to find something that you can all play, like something that can, doesn't need to involve disability, doesn't get blocked by disabilities. You get what I mean?
Say it one more time. So having something that everyone can participate in, is that what you said?
Yes.
Like can you like say a little bit more about what you mean?
Like if someone had disabilities to play outside, like running and, physical, you wouldn't be able to play. And, board games, everybody can play, right? Like sometimes indoor activities can, be much better. And
Yeah. So I think what you're bringing up is a good point of like some things are less accessible than others. Is that what you're trying to say? Like basically some people, it's hard for them to run, or some people struggle with different activities.
But the best way to get everyone to participate is to find something to do that everybody can participate in.
Yeah, definitely. But also, I think it's thinking about like what accommodations can be made to help everyone participate in different activities. So it can be doing the same activity, but if someone needs to use a wheelchair, or someone needs to use, like, for example, my sister uses a communication device to communicate. So she can play some games with people, but it just looks different, and that's okay. And it might take longer. So I think that's a great point, like trying to either find an activity that works for the most people, or being open to accommodations so that as many people can participate as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that idea. I think that's a really good one.
You're welcome.
Instruction.
Awesome. Cool. So just another discussion question. How do you guys feel about changing some of this language that you might have heard before? And are you surprised by any of this outdated language?
I would rather change the rules. Thank you.
What'd you say? Change what?
Change the rules.
Oh, change the world?
The rules.
I agree.
World. They just
The
don't
world.
anything.
Yes. I
Yeah.
If autistic people ruled the world, life would make a lot more sense.
Okay, so we're just gonna revolution.
Everything would be more logical. People wouldn't be doing weird crimes. Like the world would just be better.
Yeah, much more rule following for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
I know the language is mostly outdated. I mean the ableist language is mostly outdated, but I still hear people use the terms nowadays.
Yeah.
And I know the R word, I personally really don't like saying that word.
I mean,
People really use it, not even in the way that it originally had meaning to, but using it as like an insult. And it's real derogatory.
yeah.
I don't know a lot about this one, because I'm not on like TikTok or things like that. But I've heard from friends that people make fun of autism by calling people like acoustic and saying like, oh, are you being like acoustic? It's
Really? I haven't heard that one either.
I just learned about this like 2 months ago, and I'm really upset when I'm hearing people refer to people with disabilities, or especially autism, because lived experience.
That's
a
good point.
Yeah, when I'm hearing people speak negatively about it, or
Yeah.
then really making assumptions, because if you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. You don't meet the whole spectrum in one.
Oh
person.
my gosh. I love that you said that, because we usually say that in this presentation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just want to completely agree that this stuff is all around us. And yeah, I'm not surprised, unfortunately, that you hear some of this language that is outdated. And I just challenge you when you feel, and it's not all the time, because sometimes you don't want to be that person. And I've been in plenty of situations, but trying to challenge people and tell them that that's not okay when you feel comfortable. And just trying to, honestly, what I do more so is like lead by example of trying to use my own language that's more appropriate. But I have been that person to call people out too. So I challenge you to do that when you can, and just try to create a more inclusive world by using the language that is most respectful. Awesome. You guys are such a great group. I'm loving talking to you. I do this presentation sometimes and no one talks to me. So this is great. This is a really nice visual, I think, about how to be an ally. And so basically to acknowledge and respect differences and abilities. And like we said, respecting is so important. Everyone is allowed to be different, and it's a good thing. Yeah, what was that? Did you have something to add?
basically the same thing, where you find someone that, where you find something that everyone can participate in.
Yeah, exactly. With everyone's different ability levels. Awesome. And then, yeah, and learning about those disabilities and like getting educated about what it means, what it doesn't mean. Like if you have assumptions, really taking the time to learn more about the disabilities that you're seeing. If you are, this is mostly when I'm talking about being an ally, it's mostly if you don't identify as having a disability, but you know, you can definitely apply it either way. But especially if you don't have a disability and you might be seen to others as being able-bodied, you can leverage your influence. Like I said, I'm definitely often the person who's telling people not to say the R word. And so that's me trying to leverage the fact that I'm non-disabled to improve accessibility and inclusion for other people. But why is the most important, which is yield the floor for people with disabilities to help identify and eliminate barriers. So we always try to have people involved with Raise the Bar who are self-advocates. And those of you who are self-advocates in the room, just make sure that you know that your voice is most important. And so that's why I'm really grateful for all of you contributing today. Did you have something to add?
Are you sharing this slideshow with us after?
Yes, I can definitely send it.
Okay, that would be great, because otherwise I would have wanted to take a picture of the slide, but if you're already sending it, that would be great.
Yeah, it's a good visual, isn't it? I'll send it out. Okay, so this is even more in depth on how to be more inclusive. So, and then we're gonna play a quick game and then we'll have some questions. So thank you all for being so attentive. So just some tips on how to be inclusive. So before you're helping someone with a disability, ask if they want or need your help. Sometimes helping someone who doesn't want your help or without permission can make it more difficult for them or even put them in a dangerous situation because they're living in their situation all the time. So you just coming in and assuming that they need your help is not helpful. So making sure to always ask someone before just jumping in. When you're talking to someone with a disability, speak directly to them instead of the person that they're with. This is something I see all the time with my sister. I take her to a lot of doctor's appointments and people very, very rarely talk to her. They talk to me or to my mom. So that's just something to keep in mind to like, these are people, you know, everyone is a person. So it's really important to acknowledge that and to talk to people directly. Invite people with disabilities to things, even if you think what you're doing is not accessible, like not inviting them just because of that is not fair. So letting them know about the situation or like, I'm going to this thing, I'm not sure about the accessibility, but I'm happy to like brainstorm with you how we can make it accommodating to you. Like, I would love for you to come. Just never making assumptions. That person can choose to say no, but always being inclusive and inviting people. And yeah, when faced with inaccessibility, it's important to talk about how we can develop both short-term and longer-term solutions. So having these conversations is so important. Okay, any questions before I go into some disability mythbusters for you all? Okay, awesome. So we're gonna practice some of the things that we talked about. So does anyone want to read this out loud for the group? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken yet? Anyone?
I think Shannon wants to do it.
People who
Okay.
have difficulties
Go ahead.
same feelings or other people.
Awesome. So do you guys think this is a myth or a fact? Great. Myth. Okay. Awesome. You guys are too smart. All people experience similar emotions, whether they express them the same way or not. Yes, we all have feelings and we all want to be included, whether or not we're expressing that in the same way. Yeah, who wants to read the next one?
Disability does not mean a poor quality of life. That's a myth. That's a fact, right?
No, very much a myth.
This is hard, and I always have people struggle with this only because of the negative. It makes it confusing. So disability does not mean a poor quality of life. So is this fact or myth?
Oh, I misread that.
Oh, wait, facts, yeah.
That's a fact.
It's a fact.
Janet, you're right, I misinterpreted that.
Yep.
So, okay, so there's a negative in there. So the sentence is, having a disability does not mean a poor quality of life. Is
That's
it,
a fact.
is it a fact that having a disability does not mean a poor quality of life?
It's saying that a person with a disability can have a good life.
Oh,
Thank you.
despite
It will be more clear on here. So yes, it's a fact because people with disabilities are often viewed as tragic figures who should be pitied and have there's like negative attitudes in our society. But oh wait, this is a very dramatic statement, but I like it. It is often the negative attitudes of society and the lack of accessibility within the community that are the real tragedy. Just true. Awesome. So yes, that was a little trick question for you, but you got it. Okay. Anyone want to read this one?
There is nothing one person can do to help eliminate the barriers facing people with disability.
Myth or fact?
Miss indeed, because that doesn't seem possible.
Did you say myth?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. And that's why we're talking today, because everyone can contribute to change and you can help remove barriers by encouraging people with disabilities to be involved in their communities and just being an advocate of a lot of the ways that we've already talked about, speaking up when people use negative language and accepting people with disabilities and knowing that they're capable of so many things and have the same feelings and worth as anyone else. Okay. So that was our Mythbusters game. So to wrap up, and then I'll leave some time for questions. Where do we go from here? We talked about a lot of things today. So the first thing is that ableism exists. Unfortunately, it is deeply ingrained in our society's attitudes and systems, and it causes harm. The first step to fixing anything is recognizing it. And I hope that after today, you'll start to see these little things more often than you ever realized before. And then from there, listen and learn more. So I think on the next slide, I have a ton of resources more about these topics. So I encourage you to learn more and especially learn more from people with disabilities, because like I said, they are the experts. The history of disability rights is so interesting. So definitely try to just learn more. And then advocating and empowering. So giving people with disabilities, neurodivergent individuals, the chance to speak on their own behalf and not assuming or speaking for them. And if they're not present or if they need help, don't be a bystander. Always teach others how ableism is showing up and try to be that person to stand up when you see it in action. So with that, yeah.
I see no point.
I can't hear you back there, but I'll pause in a second for questions. So this, I will send, as I said, the slides, but this is a lot of different resources. Demystifying Disability is a great book that I highly recommend, by the first one on this list. And then there's a bunch of other ones. Great. So I will stop sharing, I think. And we can go into some questions if you have any. Thank you guys so much for your great participation. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
So something that I wanted to talk about is that I think that people don't recognize, I guess you could call it ableism, how horrible it is when, especially people in the spectrum are not included. It's that isolation that's really stuck with me as a person. I was bullied throughout elementary school. I wasn't, thank you. I wasn't in middle school or high school, thankfully, because I was able to start over, and my peers didn't understand that it was just a neurological difference and not me trying to be annoying or anything. So
yeah,
the time, and And when I got to middle school, people were a lot better at understanding that. And it was also when I was starting to gain confidence about
Yeah.
and talking about it. But when we're not being included, number one, that takes away an opportunity for us to learn socially. And the more social opportunities we have, the better off we'll be in the long run. And number two, it reduces our self-esteem to such a great degree because especially if you're in the case of I happen to be diagnosed before I was 3 years old, which is very, very rare. So I was able to get attention and everything.
Yeah.
But especially if you're in the case of someone who's not diagnosed, then you're constantly wondering like, what's wrong with me? Why don't people like me? And you feel like
Yeah.
change that.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn about my autism until the summer before 3rd grade, and I didn't really put together until like 4th, 5th grade. Oh, that's why this is happening.
Yeah.
It's really important that we need to keep including people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for sharing that. And I want to add one more thing to what you said you said 1 reason, 2 reason, and the 3rd reason to add of why it's like a shame to not include people is because the world is missing out on people who have autism. Like you were the first 2 are focused on how it affects you, which is 100% valid, but also think about how sad it is that people don't even get to know people like you and how amazing you are. I mean, I've only known you for 40 minutes, but you want people to be able to experience all types of personalities. So if you're not including them, it's hurting that person, but it's also hurting you. It's hurting your community. It's hurting like the world at large because you're not experiencing all the humor, the joy, the intelligence that people have to offer. So thank you again for just sharing that and your experience. I'm so glad to hear that middle school was better and high school is better. But I challenge you all, especially if you ever work with kids in the future, just to try to encourage inclusion for everyone. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
Do we need a ruler to keep the world in balance so that everybody gets accepted, or like
You say, do we need a rule?
it's just people doing their own thing and being their own person and their personality, everything. It's kind of a disaster. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're onto something. I think what you said, so you said, do we need a rule? I think we do need a rule is my answer. We need a rule that we should all just accept people.
I think he was saying more like a ruler or like a person to kind of.
Oh, a ruler. Yes. Well, that too.
everyone in balance.
I would say a rule more than a ruler because then if the ruler dies, we don't have a
rule.
A rule. Yeah.
Should we change the rules of this society?
Yeah,
Make it-
100%.
Yes.
We modernize the society and everybody becomes happy. We all become
Yes.
rather than being pushed away, isolated out in this world.
Exactly. And to your point, like it sounds pretty simple. Like, let's just make a rule. And I think that's what you're doing all like here today is starting, like, it's going to take one person at a time. So unfortunately, those types of things take time, but I think you're 100% right. Like there should be rules for how we treat other people. And if we can start living in that way, then it's a good start. So yeah, thank you.
I mean, there are accommodations being made that are helping.
We're getting closer every day, but it's not where it should be. So that's why all of your voices matter.
We all need to remodernize this world as a human being.
Yes, there's a lot of things that we need to fix with the world, but there's also a lot of things going in the right direction. So you guys are part of it.
We have some.
Yeah.
And also it should be inclusive to you what they want to have.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Could someone who's a little closer to the mic maybe say it? Or if you want to come closer to the mic? Or just project really loudly.
Be inclusive to eat what they want in the cafeteria. That's been hard.
To anyone that counts. Is that what you said?
Eat in the cafeteria.
Oh, in the cafeteria. Yeah. Just like you said, be inclusive to everyone in the cafeteria.
I think he's saying that we need to be more inclusive and more people should be able to.
We need to be
and
more
feel
productive.
feel more
Like in the
inclusive.
annex.
Yeah.
To be more
Yeah.
productive and
And
show respect to each other.
I love that a lot of public facilities are being better about making sensory spaces, but I do think that that needs
Yeah.
to be more of a thing also.
Yes, definitely.
I am the president of, do you know what B2IO is?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm the president of my B2IO chapter, and I'm also
cool.
one of the Zen Zone coordinators for my region, so I'm in charge of helping create sensory spaces for
Oh my God, that's amazing.
like 3-day conventions. Yeah, thank you. So, it's been really nice because we happen to have a lot of people on the spectrum in the region, and I feel like it's really underrepresented.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know this, BUIO is an international organization, and they started doing like online clubs through Zoom. So I started an Autism Acceptance Club.
That's so cool.
Thank you. Because I know that there are people around the world that are on the spectrum that I met through BUIO. I have a friend in Colorado. I have a friend in Hungary even. So
Wow.
not that I was able to develop that, and people need to be more aware. And I feel like if they don't have a personal connection to it, then they're not looking to be more aware. So I think
Yes.
getting as many people as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point. Most people, I feel like a lot of people are honestly, the personal connections are growing as people get more and more diagnosed, but yeah, it shouldn't depend on a personal connection. That's why we're trying to do these trainings more broadly to different organizations. And we hope that you guys will continue to spread that message too.
Thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you all for doing what you're doing. I mean, high school is hard and you guys seem to be doing great. Awesome. Any final questions or thoughts?
Actually on that topic, so if anybody here like wants to like learn more about Raise the Bar or like
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
their opportunities, what are some things that they can do?
Raise the bar.
Great question. Well, let me reshare my screen for the first way you can all do that, which is follow us on social media. This is our Instagram and our Facebook. So definitely follow us. And then if you're interested in becoming a volunteer for Raise the Bar, I can send you like a link to fill out. We'll probably go for like the next round of volunteers, which would be the fall. Or we have a summer camp coming up. So I will send you like an interest form if you're interested in volunteering, but definitely start by following us on Instagram, or if anyone still uses Facebook like me, there too. Yeah, let me know if it doesn't work.
I'm taking a picture a little closer there, so I just can't get everything. But I think I got it. Thank you.
There's
Okay, yeah. And Alex, I can send a follow-up email to you with more information if people want to volunteer.
It's called Raise the Bar. Is it so that we can help more autistic people raise their abilities?
Not necessarily raise their abilities. It's more about raising the bar in terms of how we accept people and like the services that they get access to.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
everyone's
it's actually called Raise the Bar because it's something my mom used to say a lot about my sister. People would always underestimate her. So she would say, you have to raise the bar. But yeah, I like thinking of it more as like we're raising the bar for services and access to services for everyone.